Hello everyone, my name is Christian. Welcome to my hobby blog. Today we are doing one of those spontaneous episodes where I watched a movie and I said, this was pretty interesting. Went into the booklet, read it, and I said, I should give this guy more attention. I really enjoyed this movie. It's a Japanese Giallo film, which I think is a little disingenuous because one of the main, at least for me, aspects that I love about Giallo is that we don't know who the killer is when we're watching the film. We know the killer right off the bat in this one, which is a big detriment in my opinion, but the film that we are going to be talking about today is the super limited edition that I did not realize was limited edition. It's copy 272 out of 333. And this is the film by Kurando Mitsutake from 2021. This is the film Maniac Driver. And again, this is a majorly limited edition of this film. It's very bathed in every sort of color that you can think of when it comes to a Giallo movie. You got your blues, your purples, your reds, your greens. I don't know if it's showing right, but it's really not. It's a lot redder in person than it is on the screen. But just my general thoughts on this movie, I thought it was pretty cool. I didn't think it was exactly a Giallo film. It has most of the aspects. It has the black gloved killer. It has woman getting murdered in very savage ways. We get some great POV shots where our main character is holding a video camera and it's just like Tenebrae or Deep Red, where we see through the eyes of the killer. And then we have an awesome soundtrack. I said later in my general impressions that I wrote that if it wasn't for the score, this movie would be quite a bit lower in terms of my rating. Right now I have this movie at about a 3.5 out of 5 in terms of Letterboxd. I haven't logged it yet because I wanted to film it and make a surprise for those who follow me on Letterboxd. But if it really wasn't for the music, this would have just flown right by my radar. This is a movie I was quite interested in when it was first announced because I'm a big fan of the Giallo genre. I'm a huge fan of Japanese cinema in general. I mean, I have so many Japanese box sets over here. You see the Zatoichi, you see the Shinya Tsukamoto, Yokai Monsters, the Ringu, Lady Scorpion, Daimajin, all these different Japanese films and film series. I can definitely say that this movie relies quite heavily on its influences, which I will talk about later, but I really vibed with this movie more than watched it. This movie just felt like a music video for a Giallo band, I guess. The director talks about in the essay book that I don't know if I can really thumb through it because most of it is nudity, but this is what it looks like when you open it. Who is killing the most beautiful girls in Tokyo? And it also comes with the soundtrack. So, and my only complaint about this very limited edition is how the booklet is included, and I don't see any nudity on this main page, but the interview for this release is really good. I enjoyed it. I'll cover this up, but here's the very famous shot of the main killer killing, I'm trying to cover her up, killing our first victim. And I guess I haven't really talked about the story yet. There really isn't a story in this movie. I'll just read off the back here because it will sound a lot more interesting than whatever I could come up with. I warned you not to ... take a taxi tonight. So it's very reminiscent of Maniac from early 70s, I think. But a deranged taxi driver appears to be randomly stalking and killing various young women on the streets of Tokyo. His descent into madness follows a personal tragedy that has since left him in search of a worthy victim to satisfy his own bloodlust and possible death. But is anything as it seems? The main crux of the film is that our main character, his wife, is brutally murdered and left to drown in a bathtub. And he witnesses this murder. And he ends up, the main killer guy that our main character watches kill his wife, he commits suicide after killing him or his wife and then himself. So our main character doesn't feel as if he was given any justice to his wife because he wanted to kill her murderer. And so he just starts stalking young women who are all played by very beautiful, well known porn modelers in Japan. He talks about this a little bit in the interviews, but mainly he just wanted to work with a bunch of them, is my understanding. But in the behind the scenes photos that are in this booklet here, they all look like they were having a great time. They got a pretty good payday from this movie, apparently. And they were all hanging out with people that they loved being around, who they already knew of. The director talks about how he is a big fan of all these different people who he has always wanted to work with. And he can finally do so on this movie. But a lot of the nudity in this movie are very, I guess, similar to the way that a lot of pornography is shot. It's very flat at times. It's really hard to describe because I'm not a porn person really at all. I don't like it. But you can tell that most of the women in this movie are very, I guess, experienced in this industry. And it's interesting to see them in a movie like this that is more horror-centric and more critical of kind of society's views on pornography and sex in general. And that was kind of one of the main points of the interview that the director discussed, was sort of how he wanted to make like a pro-sex work movie in the sexploitation genre, because he loves that contrast between total sleaze and kind of respectability of something that not many people respect, which is, of course, sex work. And there's a lot of guerrilla filmmaking going on in this movie because our main character is a taxi driver, which, again, you can feel the heavy influence from Martin Scorsese's film, Taxi Driver. I mean, the director himself describes this movie as Taxi Driver meets Maniac, which I just mentioned earlier, but that both great movies. You can really feel the influence of both of those films on this one, on Maniac Driver. But just to go into sort of the interview with Kurando Mitsutake, he talks about how this was his fifth movie that he made, and this movie resulted from a very traumatic production hells, or sort of like a production from hell is how he described it, both of them. And he said that a Japanese pink eiga, which means Japanese pink porn company, they approached him and asked him to direct a pinky film, which, if you don't know, the pinky films in Japan are all softcore porn films. There's a entire Japanese genre that I need to get more into. There's a really exhaustive book on it called beyond the pink curtain, I believe. But that genre is called the pinky violence films, which Meiko Kaji, if you know from the Stray Cat Rock series, Lady Snowblood, uh, Female Prisoner Scorpion, all those films are pinky violence films, where they have the element of the pornography, but also the violence that kind of the 1970s Japanese cult films became mainly centered around. And also, if you look at the films by Teruo Ishii, such as Inferno of Terror, Orgies of Edo. Orgies of Edo, I think, is probably the closest Teruo Ishii film to Maniac Driver, in my opinion. They're both very sex-focused, and it's good. I'm just kind of giving a very blanket summary about where this movie fits into Japanese cinema, but they offered him a spot to direct a movie, and he said, hey, can I make a horror movie? And they were like, okay, sure, whatever. Just don't do anything political. And he said, fuck that. I have some thoughts on things, is what he said. And so he took the project back and said he wanted to independently make it instead. And you can feel that a lot, especially in the camera work, where it is just a guy holding a camera, following. And the best piece of cinematography in this movie is during our first person POV scene towards the end of the movie, when we see our main guy stalk a woman, climb under her bed, and waits for her while he has the video camera on. And then 3 men walk in with her and start beating her. They're going to rape her, first in the vagina, then the anus, and then the mouth. In order, they specifically say that. And I think that's the best cinematography was in that scene, because he is carrying the camera with him. The main actor is, I hope I can find him. Of course, I can't find the name of the actor, but maybe Mami Akari. Maybe that's a producer, but our main actor guy, he is a very established actor in Japan, is what the director said in the booklet, and he's always wanted to work with him. This was another sort of passion that he wanted to fulfill, and he did. And this guy has so much fun being in this movie, and I kind of liked him a lot in this movie. I thought he did what he needed to do. You don't have any of those Oscar speeches where he gives a 4-minute speech about, something. He just goes in, does the scene very competently, very well acted, having fun. You can tell that he wants to be there. He's not just getting a paycheck. And it's very fun to sort of think about, because a lot of these movies have just kind of everyday, not everyday people, but people who are routinely acting in movies. And in this movie, you have a lot of Japanese porn stars and pinky models, and they all are having a great time. There are many scenes where they set up a camera in the dashboard of the taxi that our main character is driving, and they just put it on time-lapse mode and put in like an awesome banging bass boosted soundtrack, and it's going in very fast time. You see him driving, you see the woman in the back. There are multiple scenes where a woman in the back seat will start masturbating, or they are getting down and dirty with another man. And I think that's when they go into kind of the alleys of the movie, because sometimes they are filming on the main thoroughfare in Tokyo, where many cars are going through, dozens, maybe hundreds of pedestrians are walking by the car, and then you see uh, the windows roll up, and then they go into an alleyway and they quickly film a masturbation scene or a sex scene in the back of the car. And there are many parts in this movie where they block out the faces, the eyes, and also the license plates that the camera is displaying. And I thought that was a privacy issue that the director wanted to do because he was nervous about, just, being reported for something or accidentally doxing someone he didn't mean to. But he directly talks about it in the interview and talks about how he wanted to kind of parody Japanese cable and also Korean kind of game shows that he watches. So that was pretty interesting. I was wondering why he took that choice because very few filmmakers, if ever, block out faces, at least public faces, who are not actors and actresses in the films. But they also usually don't block out license plate numbers. A lot of productions will just take them off while they're shooting the scene and then just smack them back on and hope nobody notices. But the director also talked about how, like, at least later in the interview, he talks about how he really wanted to make an exploitation film, or at least a sexploitation film, sort of not taking place in the 80s because it does, but also he wanted to make a sexploitation film where it couldn't just be hand waved like, oh, it's made in the 70s, the sleaze doesn't matter. And the director said that if you're going to make a sexploitation film like he did, you have to be very socially aware of what you are creating because you don't want to come off as a total creep. You don't want to be super sleazy and exploiting all of your actresses for the perfect shot and all of that. You can really tell that he actually cares about his actresses. And I talked about earlier how he really did not want to make a sexploitation movie that was exploitative. I'm kind of all scatterbrained right now because I took a melatonin beforehand, so I'm falling asleep. But this director had a lot of thoughts to give when being interviewed on this release. And he talks about how he really enjoys the contrast between these brutal sexploitation scenes that you would see in the 1970s and contrasting that with very critical looks at society's role in sex and sex work and perspectives on sex work. So I didn't really think about that while watching the movie, but after watching it and reading the interview, I saw it a little bit more, but I would have to watch it again to really sort of nail down exactly what the director was intending to do and whether he was successful or not. My knee-jerk reaction is to say that he was pretty successful in his, I guess, critique of people who are not particularly accepting of people who choose to be in sex work. But he talks about how the idea of this Japanese Giallo came from his big influences, who include Argento, Lucio Fulci, Ruggero Deodato, Joe D'Amato, and many more. He would not say all that much more, but I assume the American Giallos that we sort of mentioned earlier, like Maniac, New York Ripper, A lot of New York based slasher films. He was heavily inspired by them too. He said that when he was preparing to make this movie, he was noticing there was a sort of reintroduction of Giallo as a genre that you can make. Because, and this is not something I've really thought about, but I think I've noticed it too, where a lot of these new filmmakers who are discovering all these films through, Arrow Video or Severin or Criterion are discovering a lot of Giallo films, Vinegar Syndrome especially, and how all these new young filmmakers are finding Giallo this way, and that he saw Giallo as a big genre that's coming back, so he wanted to take advantage of that. And as I said earlier, he described the movie as Taxi Driver meets Maniac. I can totally see that. That was in my head before the movie even ended. So it is not a subtle thing. I think anybody watching the movie can see that. And he was directly asked by the interviewer whether this film here, directed by Toshiharu Ikeda, the film that I personally really loved when I watched it a few months ago, that I haven't interviewed yet. I may sometime in the future. He was directly asked whether this film was an inspiration for the director. And this is the film Evil Dead Trap. And he said it wasn't... Evil Dead Trap was not a movie that he used specifically in order to get the editing and the idea from. He says he loves the director, and he specifically noted Mermaid Man or something like that. Mermaid Killer. Some weird sounding movie. He said that movie by the same director was more of an influence than Evil Dead Trap. So I thought that was pretty noteworthy because I've seen Evil Dead Trap. I was not thinking about that movie while watching it, but the editing is very similar. It's very poppy, very snappy, not a minute to waste. And the ending is quite pessimistic. I wouldn't really say the spoilers, but because this movie is not a story-driven movie, it's more of a style type of movie, but he says that the original ending was going to have the main character die after he kills a woman and feels justice in his wife being killed and him. I don't particularly understand what his stance is on this entire thing, but the director said that he dropped that ending and went for the pessimistic ending that we see in this film. He says, I dropped the original ending because I started to think that in the real world, there's no moral tail endings anymore, meaning that the good guys don't win, usually. And he says, like Donald fucking Trump and Shinzo Abe, who was the prime minister who actually got assassinated recently. And if you... one thing I do know about him that I was quite disturbed, because I don't really know about Japanese politics in general, but hearing that Shinzo Abe was somebody who did not, I don't even want to say believe in, because this happened a lot in World War II, but he did not accept the reality that comfort women were a thing. South Koreans were kidnapped during World War II and used for sex, basically, by the Japanese soldiers. And a lot of, from what I've read, a lot of Japanese people have a lot of regret and ill feelings about that, because it's a very disgusting thing to have sort of part of your own history. And Shinzo Abe is somebody who's like, yeah, that didn't happen, and de-emphasizes the trauma that happened for these type of women who did not have a say in what was going on in their lives at that time. And it's really fucked up. I don't like him for that reason, of the few things I know of him. But he says and Shinzo Abe are freely roaming among us, not facing any consequences from the criminally corrupted operations of the nations. So I decided that the movie ends with no consequences for the bad guy, and that bad guy even laughs at us, the audience. And so, again, the Pinky Company said, don't put anything political in this movie. And the director was like, nope, I'm going to put what I want into my movie. Sorry, I guess I won't make a movie for you. And this is sort of the type of thing that he was commenting on. So whether you agree with it or not, I think it's an interesting path to take in this type of film. Because sexploitation is a genre that is untapped, in my opinion, in terms of critical looks at these type of industries and sort of looking at the sort of I don't know how to describe it, but there could be a lot more study into sort of what he is talking about sexploitation and sex work. So just to wrap up, this movie was filmed in September 2019. He edited the film in November, and post-production, such as ADR, doing the audio work that was not captured on the camera when they were doing dialogue, so they would ADR or dub it, putting in the music, all of that. All of that was supposed to happen in April 2020. And of course, we all know that the COVID-19 lockdown happened in March 2020, and this director lives in Los Angeles. And he was supposed to go back to Tokyo in April 2020 for a different movie that was already greenlit for filming. And so right before COVID happened, he was all ready to go. He had everything planned out. He had the the sound booth rented out, and he ended up not going there until November. And he wasn't even there in person. He was on an iPad, as he says in the booklet, just giving direction on FaceTime, basically. And he said it was very different, and they were at the point of the, wait for post-production that he and his producers were like, we cannot be still waiting on this movie in 2021. And so he just did his best. And considering how kind of, I don't want to say amateurish, but considering how I really want to be non-judgmental with how low budget this movie is and how much the director is trying to get his vision right for this movie. This works just well enough, in my opinion. I think the music really holds up this movie, but not much else. I think the kills are interesting. I wouldn't consider myself a gorehound, but I'm quite strong-stomached. And this movie just felt like a warm blanket to me. I love the Giallo genre. I love Japanese films. The color palette throughout this entire film was just wonderful. It was beautiful. The actors and actresses did the best. At least they had a lot of fun. I wouldn't say that the terrible actors. I think they did what they needed to do. They look very pretty. They're very beautiful. Our male guy looks like such a sleazebag. He's perfectly cast. And apparently he's like the nicest guy ever, is what the director was saying. So I think he's somebody like, oh my gosh. What's his name? And from Good, Bad, and the Ugly. Lee Van Cleef. When you look at him, like, he looks like the devil. And the main character in this movie feels exactly the same way, where you see him, you think, yeah, he's the antagonist of this film. So I don't really have many other thoughts on this. This was a very kind of scatterbrained review because I wanted to talk about it because I haven't done a review in such a long time. But I also think this is such an interesting movie in terms of its influences and sort of where it stands in Japanese cinema. So that is it for today. Thank you all so much for watching. And if you haven't already, please like the video, subscribe if you want to see more. And please have a great rest of the week.